Hi, students. Welcome to a new session. I hope all of you are doing great and your studies are going well. I'm excited to be a part of your learning journey. In this session, we'll be learning about a new chapter light, shadows, and reflection. Before going into the chapter, let's understand the various topics that we are learning in this chapter. In the first part of the chapter, you will be understanding what light is and what are the various properties of light. After learning about light, we'll be learning about the different types of objects, that is the luminous and the non-luminous objects. Once we are covered about the luminous and non-luminous objects, we'll be learning about another classification of object, that is transparent, translucent, and opaque objects. In the next part of the chapter, we'll be learning about shadows and pinhole camera. And in the conclusion part, we'll be learning about a very interesting phenomenon which is known as the reflection of light and mirrors. At the end of the session, we'll be doing some practice questions based on this chapter. So let's head on to the chapter. Let's understand what light is. See, we are able to see different objects around us with the help of our eyes. During the daytime, we are able to see various things uh, around us, right? Like tables, chairs, furnitures, trees, buildings. But during the nighttime, are you able to see the objects in the same way as we have seen during the daytime? Or imagine that you are entering your room. You are able to see different objects, tables, chairs, cupboard, books. But imagine entering the same room during dark time. Are we able to see the objects in the same way as we have seen during the daytime? No, right? Even though we have eyes, we are not able to see the objects properly during the dark time or during the night time, right? So, what helps us to see these objects? It is the light that helps us to see the objects, right? So in this figure, you can see various sources of light. Can you name some sources of light? Yes, sun is an example for a source of light. Can candle is another example for the source of light. And then you can see that torch is another example of a source of light. So sun, candle, torch are some of the examples of source of light. Can you name other sources of light? Yes, star is an example for a source of light. Electric bulb is another example for source of light. So these objects emit light and we are able to see the objects around us with the help of light. Now imagine a situation if there was no light. If there was no light, then life will not be possible on the earth. Sun is the primary source of energy for us. The light from the sun helps the plants to prepare the food. And similar is the case of the flowers. Flowers will not bloom with the help of light, right? So, light is a very important part of our life. Without life, without light, life will not be possible on the earth. And we'll not be able to see different objects if there was no light. So, what is light? Light is essentially a form of energy. So, it is a form of energy and it helps us in seeing the objects. Light helps us to see in objects. Light helps us to see various objects. And a very important property of light is that light always travels in a straight line. Light travels in a straight line, and this can be demonstrated using an experiment as shown. You can see that there is a candle placed, and we are viewing the candle from the other end as shown in the figure. We are placing three cardboards A, B, and C. We are making holes in this cardboard and we are aligning this cardboard in such a way that all the three holes lie in the straight line. Imagine viewing the candle from the other end through these cardboards. We are able to see the light or candle, right? But what if we change the position of the cardboard a bit? You can see that in the second figure, the three holes are not aligned, right? They're not aligned in a single straight line. And when we view the candle from the other side, we are not able to see the candle properly. So light from the candle travels in a straight line in the first case, and we are able to see the candle, whereas in the second case, the light from the candle gets blocked, right, by the cardboard B, because the holes are not aligned in a straight fashion. So this helps us to demonstrate that light always travels in a straight line. Now, how do we see the different objects around us? We are able to see the different objects around us with the help of light. So, imagine an object like chair or table or plants. They do not produce their own light, whereas objects like sun, stars have their own light. They emit their own light. So, how are we able to see those objects which does not have light on its own? So, light from a source such as sun or a tube light falls on the objects such as plants, chairs, trees, etc., which do not have their own light. And this light gets reflected. This light from the plants or various other objects gets reflected to our eyes. In this way, we are able to understand that we are seeing a plant based on our previous learning, right? So the eyes send signals to the brain, and we are able to interpret that it is a plant. So the plant is not producing light of its own, but instead it is reflecting the light from the sun, and this reflected light reaches our eyes, and we are able to understand that it is a plant. This is how we see the various objects around us. So, light from a source of light will fall on the various objects, and this light gets reflected onto eyes, and thus we are able to see the various objects around us. Clear? Now, objects around us can be seen with the help of light and, of course, with the help of our eyes. Now, let's understand the various types of objects, that is the luminous and the non-luminous objects. So there are two classification of objects based on their ability to emit light or not. So luminous objects are those objects which emit their own light. For example, sun, stars, electric bulb, they all emit light. They are able to emit light of its own. Such objects are known as luminous objects, whereas non-luminous objects are those objects which do not emit their own light. For example, moon and the various objects that we see around us, like tables, chairs, buses, these are all non-luminous objects, right? Why is it so? Because they do not produce their own light. For example, let's take the case of moon. Moon, we are able to see the moon because of the light reflected by the moon from the sun. So those objects which do not emit light of its own, or which do not produce light of its own, is known as luminous objects. So non-luminous objects. So let's understand about luminous objects. So objects that give out or emit light of their own are called as luminous objects, right? Example, a sun, electric bulb, candle, stars. Firefly is another example of a luminous object. Then there are certain algae which is able to get illuminated during certain seasons. So they are able to emit light because of bioluminescence, because of the various chemical reactions that is happening in their body. Another example is electric bulb. So these are the examples of luminous objects. So they are able to produce their own light and emit their light. Now, let's understand what a non-luminous object or illuminated objects are. Non-luminous objects are those objects which do not produce their own light. For example, tables, chairs, glass, books that we see, they do not have their own light, but they reflect the light from the luminous source of light. Then the various people around us, we are able to see all these people because the light gets reflected from them to our eyes. Earth is another example. It does not have its own light, but we are able to view Earth from space because of the light it gets because of the light it reflects. Moon is another example for a non-luminous object. Now that we have understood about luminous and non-luminous objects, let's understand about the various types of objects based on their ability to allow light through them. They are transparent objects, opaque objects, and translucent objects. Now, what are transparent objects? The materials which allow light to pass through it, and we are able to see things through it. Such objects are known as transparent objects. Example is glass panes, the lens that you put in your eyes, the contact lenses, which improves our vision, is an example for a transparent object. The glass, right? Diamond is another example for a transparent object. And then certain kinds of plastics or, right, fiber, which helps us to see through them. So those objects which allow the light to pass through it are known as transparent objects. Now, what are translucent objects? Translucent objects allows light to pass through it, but not all the light. It allows light to pass through it partially. We can see through the translucent objects, but not very clearly. Such objects are known as translucent objects. Examples are certain fiber boards or certain plastics and certain fabrics. Tracing papers, butter paper is another example, right? Then colored glasses through which we can see the objects, but it does not allow the complete light to pass through it. These are some of the examples of translucent objects. So translucent objects are those objects which allows light to pass through them partially, and we are not able to see clearly through them, but we can see through them to some extent. And the last classification of objects are known as the opaque objects. Now, what are opaque objects? Those objects which do not allow the light to pass through them are known as opaque objects. Most of the objects that we see around, which do not allow, which blocks the light or which do not allow the light to pass through it, is known as opaque objects. So we are not able to see the other side of the opaque objects. Examples is book, table, chair, and all are examples of opaque objects. Chair, it does not allow light to pass through them, and we are not able to see through them. Such an object is known as opaque objects. Book is an example of an opaque object. The various clips that we see around is an opaque object. Bag, all these are opaque objects and do not allow light to pass through them. So all the objects that you see, like scissors, yeah, razors, chairs, tables, all these do not allow light to pass through them. Such objects are known as opaque objects. Now that we have understood about the various properties of light and the luminous and non-luminous objects and the classification of objects such as opaque, translucent, and transparent object, let's go to a practice question. So four students A, B, C, D looked through the pipes of different shapes to see a candle flame as shown in the figure. Who will be able to see the candle clearly? So we know that light always travels in a straight line, and we have demonstrated this using an experiment. In the first figure, you can see that the light gets blocked at this point. The light from the candle moves in a straight line, right? But it gets blocked at this part. So we are not able to see from the other end. In the second figure, the pipe is not a straight pipe, it is a curved pipe. So the light gets blocked at the various curves. So we are not able to see the light through the other end. The third pipe is also a curved pipe. It's a bent pipe, and we'll not be able to see the candle through the other part. And the correct answer should be the option D, because you can see that here the pipe is a straight pipe, and we are able to see the light coming from the candle because it's a straight pipe and the light travels in a straight line, and we are able to see the light from the candle, or we are able to see the candle flame from the other end in the case of the fourth figure, that is D. So the correct answer is option D. Let's now move on to the next question. You are given a transparent glass sheet. Suggest any two ways to make it translucent without breaking it. So we have a transparent glass sheet. Now, what is transparent objects? Those objects which allows light to pass through them are known as transparent object. And translucent objects are those objects through which we can see not very clearly and they allow light only partially, right? To make a transparent object into a translucent object, what we can do is that we can make the surface of the transparent object a rough surface. Okay, so the various methods in which you can do it is by rubbing it on the ground and making the surface of the transparent object translucent, right? You can make it uh, by rubbing on the ground and making the surface rough. In this way, its ability to allow the light diminishes, and thereby it gets converted from a transparent object to a translucent object. The other method is to give some coating of oil, grease, or butter. In this way, you can convert a transparent object into a translucent object. So, let's now summarize the things that we have learned in this session. So, we have learned about light. So, light is a form of energy and it helps us to see things around us. Now, light always travels in a straight line, right? And we'll call it as the rectilinear propagation of light. Now, we have learned about luminous and non-luminous objects. The objects that emit their own light is known as luminous objects, and objects that does not have its own light is a non-luminous object. An example for luminous object is sun, stars. An example for non-luminous object are moon, tables, chairs, etc. We have learned about a class of material which is known as a transparent material. The materials which allow light to pass through it and we are able to see things through it is known as transparent objects. Example is glass, right? Is a perfect example for transparent object. Then diamond, all these are examples for transparent objects. Now we have learned about translucent object. There are certain objects which do not allow the whole light to pass through it. It allows a partial light to pass through it, and we are not able to see clearly through them. Such objects are known as translucent objects. Example is tracing paper, butter paper, certain colored glasses. All these are translucent objects. And opaque objects are those objects through which we cannot see. We cannot see through the object. It blocks the light. Such objects are known as opaque objects. Example is ball, table, chairs, etc. Right? So with this, we are coming to the end of the session. Thank you.